We are all set then for third practice as Saturday arises here at Phillip Island. Welcome to World Superbikes as we kick off the 2024 campaign for 2025. Well, it's a wonderful circuit and it's a wonderful attitude. Welcome to the season opener in 2025 for the World Superbikes here and the Australian Grand Prix. It's time then for the 20-minute third practice session to get underway. And on the other side, we'll be ready for Superpole. Let's join the world feed as we get ready for all the action.
For the 17th time in the history of the Motul FIM Superbike World Championship and the 15th time this millennium, the season begins at the most scenic venue in the world of motorsport. We are live in Phillip Island, and 4 months after the last round of the 2024 season, we can finally say that it is race day in World SBK. In a few hours, 23 riders represented 14 teams and six manufacturers will spin their wheels in anger for the first time in 2025. For now, we are live in free practice 3. Anthony Nelson and Steve English ready to take you through this final practice session of a long week in Phillip Island. We've had 4 test sessions on Monday and Tuesday, 2 practice sessions yesterday, and 1 rider on top of them all.
Nicola Bulega, the clear pace setter, the clear favourite coming into this weekend. His pace and speed around Phillip Island has been clear in recent years. Think back to his Super Sport days. You think back to last year winning as a debutant in the Superbike class. For this weekend, he's the guy to beat, but there's plenty of riders that can get in the mix. You think there's a lot of Ducatis that are looking very competitive, but they all need to find a couple of tenths of a second a lap to go with Bulega.
Yesterday, Nicola Bulega, particularly in the afternoon, well, he's been impressive all throughout testing, but going through the numbers of what he did yesterday in free practice 2 was quite eye-opening. In particular, Nicola Bulega wasn't just a fast lap time, he was 0.4 of a second faster than Iannone over 1 lap, but it was particularly the amount of laps that he did that was faster than anybody else in the field. In his final 10-lap stint that he did in free practice 2 yesterday, up to 8 of them, including his final lap of that, were faster than anything that Iannone, who was second, or anybody else on the grid could do, and that is quite extraordinary.
Yeah, I spoke to Iannone yesterday afternoon, and he said that I'm closer than it looks. He feels happy on the bike. He feels that there's a step to be made. The interesting thing for all the riders is how are you using your tyre allocation, particularly for the Ducatis. How are you using that harder front tyre? Some riders struggling with that. Ryan Vickers had a couple of crashes using that harder front tyre. Alvaro Bautista crashed on the hard front tyre as well at turn 4. So how you can use that allocation to make sure that when we get to the races, you've got exactly what you need seems to be the key.
Of course, the limited allocation that we have here in Phillip Island is a different one every weekend, but here the riders have had experience with all the tyres throughout the test, throughout the whole of the week, including this man, Toprak Razgatlioglu. Toprak yesterday, after the free practice sessions in particular, it's hard to remember a time in recent times, and especially on the BMW, where he's been so publicly down, let's say, despondent.
Well, you can see Toprak there just icing down his right hand as well. That's where he's got the finger fracture on his index finger. But the reason he's not feeling confident in it is because of crashes like this. And obviously for Razgatlioglu, half a day's running in January at the Portimao and Jerez tests, and then you come to Phillip Island, and they've just got a lot of work to do with the new frame for this year. They don't have their super concession parts, and Toprak was down yesterday. One of the things he said was, I can't get the bike to stop, I can't get the bike to turn, can't get the bike to stop spinning, and it's just all of those factors. And for BMW, when you speak to Chris Gonshore in the technical department, they all say the same thing. The reason we could be competitive and win the championship last year was because of those concession parts. That was why BMW had struggled for so many years. Now they need to integrate that into the production road bike, and obviously it's difficult to get the lead times on those to get them ready for the road.
And that's something they've said time and time again, and I know you've been speaking with people, Steve, but it's something that will take at least a couple of years for them to be able to integrate into the production bike, given the times that really has. And this, at the end of the day, is a production championship. You race what is on the road, it takes a long time to get stuff on the road.
It's also a situation where what works on the track doesn't necessarily work on the road as well, and that's a challenge that all the engineers have.
Speaking of a bike which we will see on the road quite soon, the BMotor, new to World SBK in 2025, obviously run by Provec Racing, the old Kawasaki racing team. They are now called BMotor by Kawasaki Racing Team. Of course, that dual partnership, let's say, between BMotor and Kawasaki. A completely different, let's say, profile of bike to the BMW, to the Yamahas, to basically anything else on the grid.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting project. Obviously, you've got the Kawasaki power plant on it, so we know what this engine is like. But what's been interesting is to see the feedback that the riders have for this bike compared to the Kawasaki, because if the engine is the same, you'd expect certain characteristics to be the same. But what's been key for Axel Bassani is it's a lot better whenever he's on the side of the tyre, whereas for Alex Lowe's, you can see that bike moving around a lot when he gets on the gas. The last corner is a good example of that here. Put a lot of load through the rear of the bike. And maybe for BMotor, work to be done to try and just fine-tune what they need to do.
It is quite interesting for them, though, particularly to have those two profiles of riders as well, given Alex Lowe's a rider who's been on the Kawasaki's, been on the Yamaha bikes, which have a lot of traction, let's say, in World SBK and as production bikes. And then Axel Bassani, whose experience really is on the Ducati, the V4 engine, the very, let's say, MotoGP-inspired style of bike. They get that feedback from basically the two extreme points of the spectrum.
Yeah, it's also one of those situations where at the end of the day, Lowe's been riding a superbike for a long time. His style is developed around being a superbike rider, trying to get the bike up as early as he can. The Kawasaki's always been very strong whenever you're on the gas and decreasing the lean angle you have as you accelerate out of a corner. Whereas for Bassani, he's great whenever the bike's on that angle and he carries a lot of corner speed. So Phillip Island's a good circuit for him just because of the characteristics of the circuit. But it's a very different riding style. But for Bassani, any change was going to help him because he just could not get along with that Kawasaki last year. He feels motivated and ready for this season. Obviously in the winter tests, a lot of the time you're thrown in Q tyres, you've got that speed, you've got that bit of confidence from it. It's only today, when we get into the Super Pole session in a few hours' time, that we really get to see exactly where everyone's at.
Exactly, a lot of riders really with fast lap times, obviously beyond Buliga and to some extent Iannone, who was very fast over one lap. Yesterday in free practice too, you basically had another 15 riders all the way down from 3rd down to 17th or 18th position. So it'll be one of those scenarios where just a couple of tenths a second really can decide your whole fate over the entire weekend, as we saw from a few of the riders last year, including Alvaro Bautista, we had on our screen a few seconds ago.
Yeah, and for Bautista, big weekend this one, and the crash yesterday, not a big crash for Alvaro, but a reminder that you're always on that limit. And for Bautista, that limit, it's been a tightrope, and he's fallen off it quite a few times during his World SBK career. He can't afford to do that anymore. He needs to make sure that if he's going to be Ducati's #1 this year, and coming into the season, there's not many people in the paddock that refer to him as the Ducati main hope. So for Alvaro, he needs to start this weekend with 3 podiums, no mistakes, get yourself onto the front 2 rows of the grid in the Super Pole session, and then move on to Portimao and Assen, where his style will work well with that bike as well. He just can't afford to put himself in a hole, because right now Bulik is the better rider on that bike.
And it's what happened last year, particularly the first race of the season. We came here, Alvaro Bautista had his worst qualifying performance in a long time in World SBK, and then of course crashed in the opening laps of the first race of the season. That already puts you on the back foot for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and it's all about trying to have that momentum, and that's where it's interesting. Even the first laps are just coming in from this session. Scott Redding's just gone down into the 129s for the first time this weekend, so fastest lap of the weekend for Scott Redding. And it just shows that immediately everyone's trying to find something out going into the Super Bowl session this afternoon. What is key is the temperature and the conditions today. Very different to what we've had all the way through this week. And the biggest difference, 8 degrees hotter air temperature, and that's going to translate into very high track temperature today. We could have well over 50 degrees, and that's when we'll really be able to see how the tyres are reacting in that sort of extreme heat.
For reference, for anybody watching outside of Australia, it is only 10 o'clock local time right now, so still a chance for those temperatures to rise quite a lot here in Phillip Island. We've had a week of basically everything. The testing days. Well, on the Tuesday, it was quite cold, it was quite windy. The Monday as well, we had a bit of change of temperatures here. And when it's got to the weekend, actually, some of the temperatures have really risen. And that changes as well how you adapt to the track and all the information that you've been able to gather from the 2 days of testing.
Yeah, exactly. And you can see there for Bulaga as he goes fastest in this session and a second faster than Scott Redding's time, and probably about a tenth of a second off his fastest time of the weekend so far. So Bulaga immediately just thrown down that marker to everyone.
They didn't look particularly impressed down in that Ruba IT Ducati box. I think they've gotten a bit too used to what he's been doing this weekend.
Well, we saw them at one stage in yesterday's session whenever he was putting in his string of fast laps in front of Toprak, and there was a few smiles and a few laughs when we went into the Aruba box. They know what they've got for this weekend with Bulaga.
Exactly, for Nicola Bulaga, a step above everybody else on the grid. A few riders have been testing, being close over one lap, not necessarily with that consistency. One of them has been actually Danilo Petrucci. A very good start to the season for him. He's been inside that top 5 in just about every session we've had, including testing and yesterday in the free practice sessions. Petrucci, who other years has had a bit more of a difficult start of the year whenever we've got Phillip Island or other few opening tracks of the season. If he can start the season now with a bang, that could be quite positive for the rest of the year.
And I think that's where Petrucci is so important, to have that momentum from the start of the year. He won his 3 races in Cremona last year. He had the opportunity. Toprak was out. He stepped up. He was able to show how good he can be. It was a popular hat-trick for him. Obviously, home round, Barney able to win so close to home. But that set the bar for what's expected of them now this year as well, where they'll be looking for wins, they'll be looking for podiums. They're looking to challenge for a top 3 in the championship.
Exactly, for them, and Danilo was actually reasonably close last year. It was only final couple of rounds when Alvaro Bautista, and particularly when he's kind of regained his form around Aragon and Estoril, and towards the end of the season, he kind of consolidated himself in 3rd position of the championship. But there was a moment where it did seem that Petrucci, Bautista and Lowe's, Alex Lowe's in particular, were quite close. Yeah,
and it's all about just using your momentum at the right time and being able to get those good results when the opportunities present themselves. Scott Redding's just gone 3rd fastest in this session, but more importantly, 5th fastest of the weekend so far. So Redding's starting to feel a little bit more comfortable out there on the V4R. Speaking to him during the test, he said that one of the key things is you're having to relearn how to ride that bike. He has to get out of the habits he had from 3 years with the BMW and try and remember how to ride the Ducati. So his goal in the tests was to basically be alone on the racetrack. He didn't want to be around anyone else and then get dragged along. He wanted to understand how to ride that bike on his own. But now that we're into the race weekend and we're coming up towards the Super Pole session, that's whenever you need to find the right partner to be able to draft with.
And it's so important also for a team like MGM Bonova, who is switching manufacturer in the end, just like Redding, to have somebody who has that experience on the bike from 3 years prior to just be able to give them a bit of a direction in these opening races 2025.
Yeah, it really is, and having that direction is the important thing for a team, for a rider. But when you look at the Ducatis, such a strong stable of riders, they know that they're going to be thereabouts all the way through. Just Bulaga comes across the line, finds a couple of hundredths of a second. What was interesting though, he was a quarter of a second up at one stage in that lap, ends up only a few thousandths of a second faster. So not a perfect lap being put in there by Bulaga, but a good lap was put in by Toprak. And he's got himself within 0.2 of a second of Bulaga, so that's his fastest lap of the weekend as well.
That's actually happened to Bulaga the last couple of laps. Just 2 laps ago, he was 0.3 up through the second split. So just losing a little bit of time in this case in those final two splits for Bulaga. Razgat Leoglu, as you mentioned, up into the 129, low to 129. That is his best lap of the weekend. Yesterday, Toprak was around about a half a second slower over the 1 lap, but really 1 lap pace isn't the problem for Toprak. Razgat Leoglu this weekend is really finding that consistency.
The one thing for Toprak is he needs to qualify in the front row of the grid just so that he can upset the rhythm of Bulaga during the races. We know that obviously Bulaga's got that little bit of a step on everyone here this weekend, but for Toprak, if he's able to be in the mix from the start of the race, he'll just constantly put his bike down the inside and just force the other rider into not being able to run at their own pace. So for Razgat Leoglu, we saw it time and again whenever he was racing up against Alvaro Bautista, whenever he was on the Yamaha in particular, that his only goal was just to make sure that he's in the way. He's that fly in front of your face, and if that's the way Toprak has to race this week, that's how he's going to race.
Speaking of the devil, Razgat Leoglu just following Bautista now. He was following Nicola Bulaga for a couple of laps yesterday, and you mentioned it at the start of this program, Steve, that you could really see the difference between both of them coming around this circuit. Bulaga just able to be able to drift away from Razgat Leoglu quite comfortably, and Razgat Leoglu really on the edge for basically the entirety of those 2 laps that he was following, the number 11.
Yeah, and definitely it's one of those situations where for Toprak yesterday it was a real struggle to be able to do that, and for today, hopefully for him, he's just able to find that little bit more comfort out there.
So we are watching number 1 now, once again on our screens. A few of the other riders who've gone up the timing sheets. We've got 2 BMotors inside the top 5. Axel Bassani moving up to 4th, and Alex Lowe's actually on a good lap now. He could slot himself into the top 3 positions. We'll see here now going around the final corner on that new BMotor.
Yeah, just looking at the flags, it looks like the wind has changed direction compared to yesterday. And for Lowe's that we see here on the number 22 BMotor just coming across the line, we'll see what his top speed is when he comes across. He's just improved his lap time again, still further in that, and 315 k's an hour there for Lowe's. So he's found 5 or 6k compared to yesterday as well, so that's impressive.
That's good. It's good to see the comparison as well with the Kawasaki in particular. Here we have in Garrett Gerloff, the only Kawasaki, full Kawasaki on the grid, let's say, for this 2025 season. You've been mentioning that comparison all weekend, Steve, about the difference in the top speed, particularly at this moment in time, between the BMotor and the ZX-10RR.
Yeah, and right now only a couple of kilometers an hour. So for BMotor, maybe they've made a little change. Maybe Alex is getting a little bit more drive onto the straight. All those things matter around Phillip Island. So obviously, if he can come here and be 10-15 k's an hour slower and expect to contend, but if Lowe's has that top speed where he's in the mix, he'll be able to keep himself there.
He's in the mid-129s now, Alex Lowe's on the timing sheets. It is still Bulliger, Razgatlioglu and Redding at the top of your timing screens. That big step forward from Redding, but it is only 1 second, actually, between 3rd and all the way down to 15th with precisely Garrett Gerloff. So still very, very small margins here, aside from Bulliger, obviously.
Just for BMW as well, there we saw Toprak debriefing with his team after that stint. You were down chatting to Chris Gonchor yesterday during the free practice sessions, and what was the atmosphere like in the BMW box?
Well, it was the start of FP1, so actually it was quite relaxed, and Gonchor himself seemed to be quite happy at that moment in time. As you can see here now, he's a little bit more focused. Let's listen to Toprak.
And exit is not bad, only the problem, less power. But still I feel the same, you know.
You can see there the exit wasn't too much of a problem, but Toprak saying that he has a little bit less power.
Yeah, and obviously enough for Toprak and for BMW. They're still trying to fine-tune how they can use this new frame for this year, and the super concession parts gave them a lot of confidence last year to be able to get more grip and more performance from the bike. And for Razgatlioglu, now you're having to try and find that step by step. Obviously, Toprak last year, when you win so many races, when you have such a big winning margin at some of them, it always looks comfortable, like it did for Alvaro Bautista a couple of years ago as well. But you're always on that limit, and when something changes, the goalposts move. And for Bautista last year, it was the weight, it was his injuries, and suddenly the dominance that we saw from Bautista was gone. And I don't think it'll be like that for Toprak. Toprak's still going to be your favourite for the championship, even if this weekend Bulliger is your clear favourite for the races. But I think that for Toprak, it's a situation where they'll need to find some way to keep themselves in the fight in the early rounds, and then as they gain that experience, that's whenever they can be that dominant force again.
Well, at the end of the day, I think the question is how much it's a case of the BMW really not reacting well with that modification, with that elimination, let's say the super concession chassis they had, and how much a case of it is just Razgatlioglu not feeling confident about Phillip Island. It's not a track he's ever really gelled with.
Yeah, for Toprak, obviously won the race here on a Yamaha, but it's not a circuit that suits his style. The problem for Toprak is he sets such a high bar for what we expect from him that you still expect him to win, even at the places that the bike doesn't work or he doesn't work as well, just because of the way that he's able to win fights with riders out on track, the way that he's able to scrap it out. So for Razgatlioglu and for BMW, there aren't any real excuses. We still expect them to be able to be contenders.
Exactly, and we're getting on the notes on our time screens. We do have a crash on Ryan Vickers, it seems, down at turn 8. That's a pretty fast area to go down, so hopefully we can get an update on number 17 as soon as possible as we ride on board now. Here we are, Ryan Vickers up on his feet. Good to see from the rookie.
Third crash the weekend for Ryan, and the other two have been slow speed crashes at turn 10, but you come off at turn 8 at the hay shed and it's going to be a big one, and you can see Ryan's going to just get barrel rolled through there. The bike actually didn't get too badly damaged in that. it can be a lot worse at the hay shed. That's where Garrett Gerloff had a big crash, and for Garrett, the bike was completely destroyed. For Motocorsa, hopefully the Ducati's not in too bad of a shape, but we got a few hours before the Super Bowl session, so time to get that sorted.
Yeah, Super Bowl session is 1 o'clock local time. It's actually an hour more to be able to get that bike ready than we usually have during the European round, during, let's say, the standard schedule that we have during the European round. So hopefully the Motocorsa team can get that bike up and running for Super Bowl. Big weekend for them and for Vickers as well, who's looked quite good despite those crashes he had over the weekend. Just to look at that dominance that Nicola Bulega has here at this Phillip Island circuit. It was the same scenario yesterday. He was topping all of the sectors. He's topped all the sessions. So I think we've spoken quite a lot already about how dominant it is, but it doesn't get any clearer than this.
Yeah, and for Bulega, it's the pace and consistency as well. At 29.1 last time around, it was 29.1 the time before that, and his fastest time in the session is at 28.9. So all of his laps running in a pretty tight delta.
You mentioned Razgat Lioglu, obviously, as a rider who would be in the best position to really, if he qualifies well, to get himself in front of Bulega and really bother him and disrupt that rhythm. But what about some of the other Ducati riders? Because we know perhaps Alvaro Bautista, being his teammate, the Ruba IT Ducati, maybe wouldn't be so inclined to be as aggressive as somebody like Razgat Lioglu with. But what about some of the other riders around? Andrea Iannone's got nothing to lose. Danilo Petrucci hasn't got too much to lose either.
Yeah, Petrucci doesn't have too much respect on the racetrack as well. So if he's given a chance to come through, he'll do that. But for Iannone, for Petrucci, it's good to see Scott Redding up there as well. The problem for them is they need to make that move as early as possible. I think someone like Iannone, he's usually pretty quick off the line. He can be a bit of a factor, but you need to then stay at the front as well, and that's going to be really tough for them. Races are races, and it depends on how things play out. If Bulega ends up qualifying on pole but drops to 5th at turn 1, suddenly he's got a bit of work to do. It comes down to the pit stops as well. How efficient are the teams going to be? Because we might have a minimum pit intervention time here, 63 seconds you have to spend in pit lane from entry to exit. Sometimes teams are a little bit too hasty and they get a penalty, and sometimes teams are a little bit too conservative and they lose 1 or 2 seconds. Last year here, Bulega in race 1 in particular, he was within a 1/10 of a second of the pit intervention time. If you can do that, that's giving you free time on the racetrack as well.
Whereas somebody like Razgat Lioglu last year left pit lane, I think it was around about the quarter of a second before that time was up, and consequently got a penalty. It is actually 5 times the amount of time that you exceed that pit intervention time by. It's 5 times that you get added to your race time at the end of the race. So that is actually a big penalty, all things considered.
Good lap being put in there by Alex Lowe's to get up into 3rd fastest, half a second off Bulega's time. Just looking at his time through the speed trap as well. A couple of Ks slower than he had been earlier on, 313 Ks an hour. So for Lowe's, it seems that every time he goes past, it's around 312 to 315, 16. So he probably needs an extra couple of Ks an hour, but if you're in that slipstream, you're going to find a little bit more as well. It looks like he's able to get out of that last corner a little bit better today than yesterday as well. And part of that will also come down to the fact that if you're using the different tyres, we've got 2 different race tyres here this weekend for the harder comp. That new tyre, some riders like the Moss tyres, so they're all trying to
has come into trouble at turn 1. It's coming up on our time screens as a technical problem for the number 97. We haven't had any indication of that. He was on his out lap there, so maybe just a case of some early issues leaving the pits. A few riders on fast lap times now at the end of this free practice 3 session. Alvaro Bautista and Andrea Iannone in particular on your screen right now, getting very close through that 3rd split to Bulega's lap time. It would be the closest we've seen anybody to Bulega this weekend so far. See what the number 29 can do. He loses a little bit of time through that final sector. It is, however, it's not his fastest lap of the weekend. He was a 1/10 of a second faster yesterday, but still moves him up to 4. For Bautista, he also loses time in that final sector. So that seems to be that lap that Bulega set at the start of this session. That final split is the difference right now.
Yeah, and Bulega last time around came around with a 29.0, so faster than anyone's gone for the rest of the weekend. So his pace all the way through this session has been just really consistent, and he's laying down that marker to everyone else. But as I said earlier, if you're in a race, sometimes that rhythm can be a bit different. You can do a few things just to upset the rhythm of the other riders. So that's what everyone has to do right now, because Bulaga has a very clear 1 lap speed advantage, 5 lap speed advantage, and most importantly, 10 lap speed advantage in terms of his consistency.
Another rider on a fast lap, Danilo Petrucci. He is also on course to move up provisionally to second position on a timing sheets. Going through that second split, we'll see still on course to move up to third through the third one. So another good lap from Petrucci. A few riders have actually set a few good lap times in the final couple of minutes. Sam Lowe just moved all the way up to 6th position on time sheets. Another Ducati up there. Remy Gardner as well has moved himself into the top 10 and as top Yamaha in what has actually been a very difficult weekend for the Yamahas and for the number 87 in particular. So some fast laps here towards the end. As the checkered flag comes down, Petrucci does move up to 4th, his fastest lap of the weekend.
Yeah, and Ducati, BMW, Ducati, Bimoda, Ducati inside the top 8. So it's clear to see what the bike to be on here this weekend is. And the Ducati, it's always a really strong all-round package, and you can see that by the fact that so many of the leading independent teams have that as their bike. But around this Phillip Island circuit, it's a bike that works really well.
Well, even Jari Montella coming in here as a rookie, coming in from the Super Sport class, is also into the 129s. He's just outside of the top 10, but he's ahead of some names like Angel Locatelli, who's been amazing around Phillip Island in the past. Michael van der Mark, Xavier Lecona, Gerloff is quite indicative of that big advantage they do have. So right now it is actually only Nicola Bulligas on the fast lap, and he could actually improve his time here towards the end of the session. I don't think Bulligas come in. He's 17 thousandths of a second slower than that fast lap time he set at the start of the session. You can see how happy he is there, slapping the handlebars of that V4R. So once again, Bulliga 28.92, just on another level.
Yeah, he's just got those few tenths of a second all the time on everyone, and for Bulliga, he needs to make sure that he gets to the Super Pole session and he carries that form through with the softer tyre for that session, and then he needs to make a good start, try and run his race. Let's see what happened to Toprak through turn 3, and yeah, for Toprak down in towards Miller Corner, just to look over his shoulder there, but it doesn't look like there's anyone around him, so we'll just have to wait and see what's gone on for Toprak through there. I wonder, did he get pushed by the wind through there as well?
Just seemed a little bit unsettled there, but nothing too bad for the reigning world champion. He is second at the end of the session over 1 lap, so a good sign for Razgat Lioglu going into the Super Pole session. Is a bit of damage limitation for him right now, but it is where he needs to be over 1 lap. Just for comparison's sake, his teammate Michael van der Mark is down in 14th, so that BMW struggled at the minute. Van der Mark actually didn't set his best lap time of the weekend in this session. He's was around about 1/10 of a second slower than what he did yesterday in the free practice session. That is 15th on the combined standings, so that BMW really struggling at the minute in Phillip Island. We'll see him go into pit lanes. We'll see a few of the teams do that practice start. Do that pit stop, that pit stop example for the flag-to-flag races, that practice for the flag-to-flag races, I should say, as they've been doing all weekend.
Yeah, so when the riders enter pit lane, a timer starts on their dashboard. They come down into the pit, so we can ride on board with Toprak here. The team will change the front and rear tyres. Flag-to-flag practice means that you always think about the suspension as well. You're changing from a wet to a dry setting typically. Obviously for today, that won't be an issue for the teams and riders, but you try and drill all those things in. The rider takes a little drink, they have a chat with their crew chief, and then they're ready to go. It's all about trying to be as calm as possible all the way through that.
Look at that from Nicola Bulliga. All of those laps inside the low 128s, high 128s or low 129s. Just metronomic consistency from him, and just about all of them faster than anybody else on the grid.
Yeah, that's other than lap 13, everything's within a couple of tenths of a second there, and even that's still a low 29. And looking at this session, that slowest time in that stint still would have been good enough to put him inside the top 6.
He's been faultless all weekend, but what matters is what comes up next in the Super Pole session and later on in race 1. That is where things actually matter, and a few riders will be still praying that something goes wrong for the number 11, as it did happen a couple of times last season, or as has happened here at Phillip Island. As we say, we always have favourites,
They do indeed, but what an end to the third session there. Nico Bulliger on top from Top Rank in second by 0.2 of a second. That's going to get quite entertaining when we get into Super Pole. You can watch that live on JB Motorsports at 2 a.m. British time. The lives are ready for that now. So, all getting set then, all going to be very entertaining here from Phillip Island to start the 2025 campaign for the World Superbikes. We'll see you later on. Take care. Bye-bye.